Okay, so we're going to do the next level advanced subject, and that's called price modifications on variations. So when you have a product that has multiple variations, you can indicate that one of those variations costs more than the other. One of those variation options costs more than another option. So say you have small that costs $5, you can have a large that costs $7. And the way you do that is that you add a modifier, a price modifier to the option, and you add a price modifier to the catalog, the price book, and you connect those together. So you say, okay, this option has a price modifier attached to it. And then in the price book, you tell it what that modification is. Is it $5? Is it $10? Is it $1? Whatever it is, so that you can have an option that's modified, has a modified price, and then in different catalogs, you can have different amounts in those catalogs to support that. So we're going to walk through this whole process just real quickly. I've tried to abbreviate the steps as much as possible, but so bear with me here. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get our client credentials by passing in the client secret and the client ID along with the grant type request. And so that's going to put that token into a variable called client token. We're going to use that going forward. All right. So first thing we do is create a basic product. So here is an electric range, 30-inch range, blah, blah, blah. So we use this example quite a bit. So that's created a product and stored the product ID and SKU into different variables. Close those up. Now we're going to create the variation. So we create, if you remember in the first advanced subject, we just created variation and options. So we're going to create the variation called finish. And then that's going to store that variation, that finish variation ID there. And we're going to add one option, the color white. And this is going to store that option ID so we can modify it, right? And so, as we said before, we have to modify both the SKU and the slug at the very least. And I generally will choose append. You can prepend, or you can say the slug is exactly this ID, this number. And so I'm going to append -white to the parent slug, and the same thing for the SKU. So we're calling that variation, and then the option within the variation, the modifier's endpoint. Let's say I want to SKU append -white. Now the final step in modifying the variation option itself is to add a variation modification type of price, and we give it a reference name. So unlike the other option modifiers, we're not modifying the option itself. We're going to actually refer to a different modifier that's going to happen in the price book, and we connect those two with this thing called reference name. So we'll go ahead and add that. And then we'll add the variation to the product we created. So we're going to call the PCM products by the product ID, and then call the relationships variation endpoint and create that relationship called finish variation ID. So that's connected that variation ID to the parent product. And we just call the build endpoint to create the child products. So those get created, and if you have thousands, it could take a few seconds to do it. But this just says, yep, we started that process. We'll complete on our own. Now we're going to create the price book. We'll call the default price book, and then we're going to add the price for the parent SKU, $541 for that electric range, right? And then we're going to create a modifier that has the reference name that was associated to that option, the white option, called add 5. And then the type is going to be price increment. So price increment or price decrement would do, obviously the opposite things. Or there's another one called price equals. If you wanted to set a very specific price that's not calculated, you could do that. So price increment of $5 in US currency. Send on that. So now we've created the product variations, the options, the modifiers, and the price book. And then we're going to create a quick hierarchy, because in order to build a catalog, this all kind of come together at the end. We have to have a taxonomy. So we'll say main taxonomy is what's going to be called. We'll have one node in it called shop. We're going to call the hierarchy IDs nodes endpoint. Create one called shop. And that stores that shop node ID here. And we're going to add, so we're going to call the hierarchy shop node and the relationship products and add that product ID we created at the beginning. All right. So I've created the price book and the hierarchy. Those are the two key things we needed in order to create a catalog. So we create a catalog and we say we want to use price book of the price book ID we just created and the hierarchy ID of the hierarchy ID we just created. And we say send. And so that's stored the catalog ID in this variable. And again, it will say pending. Oh, I haven't published yet. Published is pending. All right, we created the catalog. Now we're going to send on that catalog ID's releases. And so it says pending while it builds the catalog. Then we can call that catalog. And since we only have one, it becomes the default. So we'll call the catalog products endpoint. And we should get back 2 products. And so we have the white one that, as you can see here, so for the price, it says it's 546 instead of 541 because it has a modifier called add 5. And here's the dash white version of the skew and the slug. And then we show the price, and then under the price modifiers metadata, it shows that there's a price increment of $5 that's connected to this price. And then the parent of that is BED 18, which is this one, BED 18. And so this has the 541, which has no price modifiers on it at all. And that's how we make modifications to prices.